Okay, so when we're gonna look at this together, the purpose of this is so that we can agree on an action step and then do a little bit of planning about how you're gonna give the feedback and then what that looks like in your next coaching meeting with Joanna. Okay, so let's take a minute and watch together. This is from what day?
Yesterday.
Okay.
September 27th.
Let's take a minute and watch together. And what we're watching for, actually you tell me, what are we watching for?
What, the stuff that you just said?
Yeah, so like in order to get to there, what do we need to find in the video?
We need to look for student gaps, and see what the teacher gap is, and then align that to an action step that we're creating for her.
Beautiful. Okay, I'm gonna pull up some notes on my computer. Go ahead.
We can start it? All right.
And the reason we're asking these two questions is not to make sure you know the hierarchy of needs. It's to focus on what is in caps. What's in caps here? Main idea. And you probably noted at the top of your packet today in big bold letters, it says main idea. Okay? So in class today, we're going to be talking about how to identify the main idea specifically for an ACT exam. Let's quickly stamp what was the main idea of Maslow's hierarchy of needs. Lauren, what did you write down? Great job. Okay. That was an idea that we stamped and we annotated. Okay. That leads us into the second question. What steps did you take? We all annotated, and we did so together, right? I stopped you when I said, find the main idea of each paragraph. And then after each paragraph, we applied it. So the steps that you took here were to annotate and to find the main idea of each paragraph in order to find the overall main idea of our passage.
You tell me when you feel like you got
Okay, we did that, right?
enough.
So
I'm flagging that I feel like I have enough,
Yes.
but if you need more, you can.
Yes.
You do?
So, yes.
Okay.
And I did, I also did an observation on Grow for this that I put an action step in, so I want to see if we're aligned on what we're noticing.
Beautiful. I completely honestly have not looked at it yet. So,
okay, great.
Okay. So, what are you noticing is the student gap?
I am noticing that students are not articulating the steps that they took in order to find the main idea. Let's before trying to. I know that we need to go to teacher gap next. Yeah.
But I want to ask another question, which is, what's the impact of that? Like, if students aren't doing this, what then happens next or later?
Whenever they're applying this skill to activities later on in the lesson, if they can't articulate the steps that they need to take, they're not going, from the beginning, they're not going to be successful on the other tasks that we do throughout the lesson, and they're not going to achieve the aim.
And get mastery.
Right.
The reason I ask that is just so that to make sure that we can get Joanna to articulate that.
Yeah.
Right. So, the student gap is that students aren't articulating the steps they took. I don't think it's just the steps. I don't think that they effectively articulated the stamp either. Right. So I think it's the steps and stamp. Okay. So then, what is the teacher gap?
So I think right here something that I noticed was that she was answering for the students. She wasn't really providing like the wait time. She would say, what are the steps we took? Pause for like a second. We annotated, right? So she was filling in the gaps when she didn't hear the students articulating it and didn't really provide an opportunity for them to say it.
Yeah. What about with the stamp? What happened there? Because it was a slightly different thing, but I think we can use both.
I heard that she called on a student. She cold called a student. I might need to go back and
Good.
yeah.
Main idea of each paragraph, and then after each paragraph of our passage. In order to
She was over here and she was snapping.
Okay.
That leads us into the second question.
It's right before this.
Okay. That was. What did you write down? Great job. Okay. That was an idea that we stamped.
That was it.
Okay, so because I couldn't even hear what the student said, so that means the other students probably weren't able to hear it either. So the key point wasn't stamped. I think I didn't notice that in the observation because a lot of the students started snapping too, so I thought that meant that they all got it, and I didn't think to. I noticed the gap with the what steps, but I didn't notice that they didn't actually stamp the stamp.
All we know is that one student has it.
Yeah.
Maybe. But we don't actually. So we couldn't hear her stamp. We heard Joanna confirm it was right, but we don't know if any of the other students actually have it down. And also, I know Joanna doesn't know. How do we know Joanna doesn't know?
Because she didn't restate what the student said. She just moved on.
That's one thing she didn't do. I also think she didn't monitor their work.
Oh, you were talking about the other students.
Yeah,
She didn't know the other students.
Yeah.
I thought you meant that she didn't know what that student said.
Oh.
I'm sorry.
No, she doesn't know what any of the other students said because
Because she didn't monitor
confirmed
right.
that student got it, but she didn't look at anybody else's paper to note if they are getting it before or after that.
So, I actually started the video. That was their do now. So they had done that for their do now. I started the video as she was I walked in right as she was about to debrief. So I'm not sure if she monitored while they were working on it.
Okay.
It may have happened.
Okay.
But yeah, I can't say for sure if it happened or not.
Okay, that's
But
really fair.
I did walk in probably about 3 minutes into class.
Okay.
So that could have been 3 to 4 minutes in.
Great. So I think that then we can't make the claim that she didn't monitor, but I do think we can still claim that the stamp was unclear and she didn't hold students accountable to checking to make sure that they had the correct information. Okay, so then let's get a little more precise. We've been working on articulating the teacher gap, so what would we say it is?
The teacher gap is that she is not holding students accountable, not holding all students accountable to responding to the questions, to completing the task correctly.
I think that it's more important. It's more than just a task because we're talking about a stamp, right? So I think we can zoom in on this idea of stamp and we can tie stamp to rigor, right? Because the rigor is getting students to articulate the stamp, and making sure 100% of students have it, right? So not holding all students accountable
to
articulating
the stamp.
Okay, so what comes next?
We get to the so we know the what, so now we need to figure out the how, what action step is going to help her close that gap. So shouldn't hold students accountable. So I'm thinking whenever a point is stamped whole class, the expectation should be that all students
What does she need to do?
have clear expectations for what to do during a stamp.
Great. So what's the goal? What do we need kids to do?
Now, what do we need kids to do?
Well, so the teacher gap needs to be aligned to what the student gap is, right? So the thing that we need to happen is we need to ensure all students are articulating the stamp, right? And then it's the how and the things that we're gonna list, right? But you were wordsmithing a lot, and so I was just trying to get it.
Yeah.
Stamp. Kids must stamp, right? And so then the how is what? How can she get kids to stamp it?
I know. I'm thinking like, so is this like, we're talking about a stamp during a debrief? Or just any stamp in general?
I think it's any time, right? If it's the key point of the debrief, it's for this, we were doing a skill, right? Like,
Yeah.
presumably one we were going to practice later, and that's really important.
Yeah.
So I think it's if it's a debrief or a skill or content stamp, it's the same how
Yeah.
we could leverage. What do you think are the things she needs to do in order to make that happen?
Have an expectation that all students are writing.
Give clear what to do.
Yeah.
That all students write.
I feel like I'm going too far ahead now, but I was going to say whenever like if she cold calls a student, asks a student to share, have students some kind of procedure to understand so that she knows that other students understand what that kid said.
What's an example of something that she could do for that?
Like if one student stamps the key point, she could have another student restate it. She could do a turn and talk, like beforehand, and then cold call on somebody that she heard.
So, that's almost like it's a, you're talking about like a read, write, think, or no.
Write, talk,
Yeah.
think, write, talk. I don't
Think,
know.
pair, share.
Yeah.
Think, write, talk. Any processing
Yeah.
time. We are giving students processing time,
Mm-hmm.
and we are holding them accountable to that processing time. I don't have strong opinions about what it has to look like. It could be a think, pair, share. It could be a turn and talk. It could be revoicing.
Yeah.
But I think what we're saying is giving clear and accountable processing time.
Mm-hmm.
Both, I think, before and after the stamp.
Clear and countable processing time before and after stamp.
And so we've got two venues, right? The what to do direction and the clear and accountable processing time. Is there anything else that you would add to her how?
Does the clear and accountable processing time, does that include like the final stamp at the end, or should there be like, because with a stamp I always think like, you know, after you process it, after you have your time to talk or write or whatever, you should have a clear moment where we're like, okay, this is the stamp. The stamp is this. Write that on your paper. Like,
so I think it depends. It depends on the stamp. It depends on the kids. Like right now, I am working on not saying the stamp so that they articulate it for themselves. Right.
Okay.
So it depends. I think this is English 3. I think we can phrase it so that it's not teacher must say stamp, but like stamp is provided somehow with clarity and like precision. Like I don't know if that could be a teacher, that could be a student, that could be like revising somebody else. Like there's a lot of different ways you could do that, I think.
Yeah.
But I think that's because that is one of the things that wasn't happening here. It wasn't.
Yeah. I've seen some people, they do like a little graphic or something like on their slides for a moment, like this is where you need to be like capture what we just said on your notes now, 1 minute, go. Something like that.
Well, that's clear what to do directions that all students write.
Yeah, but I mean like after they've had time to initially write and then we've debriefed it, then like take 1 minute, revise what you have to like.
Okay.
Kind of like an afterwards thing.
Yes. So when I said give clear and accountable processing time, I actually added both before and after.
Yeah.
So that to me is that
That's
what you're trying to say?
time. Yeah, I was thinking processing time as like talking it out, you know, discussing, and I was thinking that like something else would come after that, like a final thing, but that works too.
Yeah. Clear and accountable processing time before and after stamp. Yeah, I'm trying to think if that's an important nuance to capture. I think it is. I don't want to do too much, so I'm trying to like process through.
Yeah, because when I think processing time, I don't think like this is my finalized answer. I think I'm still wrestling with this.
So then let's say give clear and accountable process time before the stamp. And then ensure all students record
Yeah.
a final stamp, period. And we talked right before we started this about potentially an execution and a planning focus. And if you're still doing that in the next couple weeks in coaching, what would the planning element of this be?
She would need to know like what her stamps are. Like what are the key points? What should students be? Like what do students have to know in order to be successful here to show mastery?
Pre-plan all stamps and lesson plans in the form of key points, or pre-plan all stamps and lesson plans in the form of key points or thinking steps.
Yep.
Okay, so what do you do with this? Oh, was this close to what you had for your action step?
It was close-ish. I stayed in there for like 20 minutes.
Okay.
So I saw a lot of the lesson, and what I had was to break up the teacher talk with more student-heavy lifting, which is kind of like, that's aligned to what we're doing.
Yep. I think this is zoomed in maybe on the stamp, just because we were moving quickly, but yep. Okay. What do you do with this now that you have it?
Now that I have it, I'm thinking about maybe showing this to Joanna, and we can watch it together up to that point and go through those questions, like what is the gap that you're noticing with students?
Yeah, so it's basically this meeting.
Just happening with Joanna.
Yes. And then what happens once you arrive at this with Joanna?
Once we, once we've talked about it and she knows that that is the action step, in our meeting, we could look at her upcoming plans and plan for how we're going to implement this action step into her upcoming plans, and then a time for me to come see it in action.
What is more impactful, and this is a genuine question, this isn't leading.
Yeah.
What is more impactful for her right now, planning time or live practice time?
Planning.
Okay. So then, yeah, that's where you would go, is the planning practice. I think the intent is the get up and do it practice.
Yeah.
But if the gap is really in planning right now, that's where we want to live. Eventually, get up and do it is kind of the goal. But you already established that planning is where her biggest move is. Okay. So, what does that look like for your next meeting with Joanna? Like, you don't have a whole lot of materials for her.
Right.
And when is your next meeting?
It would be next Wednesday.
So no more lessons that week.
Mhm.
So then thinking about the context of next meeting with Joanna, where's the planning move?
Like, so
like, what are you gonna plan? Or what are you gonna co-plan for practice?
Yeah, because I know that, I'm pretty sure it says on our document that lesson plans aren't prioritized next week. Yeah.
But what is she will be planning something, I think, that directly ties to this.
Yeah. She'll have her internalization stuff that she's working on for quarter 2. So we can tie it to the stuff in that, like what are the key points the students have to pull out,
or the standards breakdowns for the thinking steps.
Oh, yeah. I'm gonna write that down. Standards breakdown, thinking steps.
Because if you can get her to see the value in going through the thinking steps in a standards breakdown, and then get up and make her practice. Be like, okay, let's pretend that this standard was what you were doing in this moment, and they're articulating back to you the process that they go through.
Yeah.
And then if you can get her to stand up and then do it after you plan it, that's all the practice, and then it's really solid for her. Like, oh, this is why I do standards breakdowns. This is how it plays out in a minute by minute moment in class. So when I've planned this out, I've got my stamp. You know what I mean? Like it kind of that could be a really cool, like, everything aligns moment. Okay.
Okay, that's what we can work on.
Other questions?
I don't think so.
I cut you off. What
I think I was gonna say I know that she is working on this right now.
Perfect.
So we'll
That's
have
a
some
nice
to work with.
alignment. Yeah. Can you videotape it?
The meeting next Wednesday? Yes.
Great. Beautiful. And then we can take a look at it for feedback, and I think that's the point at which I think that is the smallest Matryoshka doll, and then we'll go back up the scale. So, okay.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right.
Sounds good. Stop recording.